Chosin Reservoir was where the Marines first saw action against the North Koreans and the Chinese.
When we went to Korea, we had a World War II mentality.
The fighting in Korea was different than any other war period.
The terrain over there was so much different than the island fighting in the Pacific.
We'll all be home by Christmas. Well, when we started going up there, that was the end of the be home by Christmas deal.
It was right at the end of November that the Chinese came out in force.
The Chinese were in the number of 200,000 and we were 12,000. They always came in with bugles blowing, whistles blowing, and shouting.
They scare the hell out of you.
But when the Chinese finally hit us, we took a terrible amount of casualties.
I knew I was going to have wounded, and I knew that the wounded would not live long in the cold.
And I swore to God, if I ever got out of that place alive, I was never going to get that cold again. Oh, it was miserable cold.
They told us it was 35 below zero, 40-mile-an-hour wind, and it was snowing.
In order to keep from freezing to death, you literally had to keep moving. You didn't stop.
I still have to sleep every night with socks on it because of my feet were frostbitten in Korea.
They ended up losing their feet, their hands. Several Marines froze to death up there.
The corpsmen were holding the morphine syringes in their mouths in order to be able to have some morphine that they could use.
You see some of your friends and buddies get shot and die. And by the Lord, it could be you.
Everyone that left that hill was either on a stretcher or carrying a stretcher.
All of those people didn't go up there with the idea of being killed. They went up there with the idea of coming back and going home.
There's a lot of good men perish that nobody ever knows about.
I have a very strong feeling that the reason I am here is because there's a lot of people that aren't.
War is a funny thing, but it has to be done.
When I go to the football games or anything and hear the national anthem, all my tears come to my eyes because that's what we fought for.
When they talked about seeing the flag being raised and seeing these guys choke, and I still choke. It's a great thing.
There is always a price for freedom, and that price is there. It's going to have to be paid by somebody.
For every obligation, there's a responsibility.
You make a commitment, you keep that commitment, and sometimes that commitment costs you your life.
The red is the blood that we fought for.
The war broke out June the 25th. I was in Korea July the 4th, 1950.
About a month after the Korean conflict began, I enlisted.
In June of 1950, the war started. July, I got my greetings. August, I was on my way.
I raised my right hand, stood up with everybody else, took my step forward, swore my allegiance to the country, and I was on a bus going to Fort Meade.
The war started the 25th of June. The 26th of June, I was in Fort Knox re-enlisting.
My 21st birthday was Thanksgiving Day over there in 1950.
At Incheon and Sewell, I was just 19 years old. And I had just turned 20 when I fought at the Chosin.
I was just a scared kid when I went over there. Jeez, 17 years old, go on 18.
And I'm the youngest person that received the combat entry badge. I received it at the age of 13 years old.
I think you grew up and you knew you were away from mother, and you knew you were away from your father because the voice was different.
17, 18-year-olds, you walk out in front of traffic, mean, ready to go. But you learn quick. When you hear them bullet go,
no, we didn't go thinking there was going to be a war. But then when we were called to duty, we were ready to go, and we were invincible. We didn't think we could get hurt.
In about a week, I was a combat veteran because I had seen a lot of my friends that I was in basic training with die, and I had to help put them in border bags and different things like that. So I became mature very quickly.
It was a time that I felt that I had to be there, had to serve.
I agreed that I'd serve my country if they wanted me, and they wanted me. My dad had fought for his country in World War II, and I was at the age where a war came along, and it was up to a lot of people like myself to do what we could.
5 years after World War II, the military was being completely dismantled. There was no wars on the horizon. It was just, you know, it was sort of like I was very adventurous and let's go in and see the world type thing. No thought process of any combat whatsoever.
That was one of the unique things I thought when I went into service. Well, you know, I'm going in, it's peacetime, World War II is over, there won't be another war, and lo and behold, June of 1950.
Well, at the end of the Second World War, Korea had always been one country before then, and actually it was occupied by the Japanese forces. At the end of the Second World War, the United States and the USSR basically divided the country between North Korea and South Korea, and divided it the 38th parallel.
They got the impression that we would not react to any invasion of South Korea. The North Koreans were prepared for it. They had a large military force, and they crossed the 38th parallel, and very quickly.
We rushed a few troops from Japan when the invasion began, and then we had to react and call up forces in the United States to get over and protect the Pusan perimeter. Otherwise, the North Koreans came very close to completely overrunning South Korea.
The Korean War started in June of 1950 when the North Koreans invaded the South.
North Korea invade South Korea, and that would have already become a communist state. Well, obviously, the United Nations and the United States decided that this is the place to draw a line in the sand. And obviously, the only way to do that was to put forces in there and stop their aggression before it went any further.
Korea was a war that stopped communism in its tracks. It was the first time that somebody drew a line and said, you don't go any further than that.
We were told that if we don't stop them in Korea, it's a stepping stone to Japan. And they didn't want them getting into Japan. So we had to stop them in Korea.
Here people had been enslaved, or would have been, and a lot of them more would have been killed and murdered if we hadn't stepped in.
The guidance from North Korea was go down and take South Korea. And we said, no way. And that's why we ended up fighting in Korea.
We knew that North Korea was being turned into a communist state, and the United States was following the same policy then as it followed in Korea. In Vietnam, it was to block the spread of communism in Asia.
Korea was divided before the war started, and when World War II ended, we gave North Korea to the Russians, and the United States occupied South Korea. But then they crossed the line on June 25th of 1950.
Russia was still a major threat in those days, and Russia was training and outfitting the North Korean army, and the North Korean army was a good army.
Back then, the big threat to the United States was the Soviet Union. And there was this, you know, when the Iron Curtain went down right after World War II in about 1948, the Russians or the Soviets had become our major threat. So we had this threat of communism and of them trying to take over the world.
In basic training, they were teaching us about fighting communism. I didn't know what the word communism meant.
I guess we never declared war, and we weren't attacked by the North. We was over there helping the South Koreans,
and we was fighting communism.
And there is no doubt in my mind that there would be a communist Asia now if we hadn't stopped them in Korea.
The forces of the United Nations are in Korea to put down an aggression that threatens not only the whole fabric of the United Nations, but all human hopes of peace and justice. If the United Nations yields to the forces of aggression, no nation will be safe or secure. If aggression is successful in Korea, we can expect it to spread throughout Asia and Europe and to this hemisphere.
We started off fighting the North Koreans because the North Koreans invaded South Korea. Remember, it had been separated at the 38th parallel.
I don't think people realize what happened in Korea. I really don't. I don't think many Americans realize that they were stopped there. Had it not been for China coming in like they did, there would have been no real war over there, because we had them on the run after we hit Incheon.
We had a treaty and agreements that we would help the South Koreans in case of invasion, and so that's what we did.
We never actually declared war because it was the United Nations war. You got to remember, it was the United Nations war. We were part of the United Nations military.
Politically, we were there because the communists had overrun the 38th parallel, and that Truman wanted the United Nations to stop it. This was the first time the UN had got involved in anything. And that's why he called it a police action.
What we were doing there at the time, we thought, was just trying to push him back over the 38th, which we eventually did, and so we won our first objective anyway. But then the Chinese came in and changed everything.
Mr. MacArthur had the idea that he would reunite North and South Korea, which had been divided since World War II between the communists and the United States. But of course the Chinese had threatened to come into the war if we went north of the 38th parallel.
The Chinese were worried about us crossing the 38th parallel.
The 38th parallel, as you may remember from your history, was the demarcation line after World War II, and the area above that was under Soviet influence, and the area below was under the influence of the South Koreans and U.S. forces, or I should say United Nations forces.
We had defeated the North Koreans, but then the Chinese came in, and they came in numbers, in great numbers, and so it was a whole different picture with the Chinese.
Generally, MacArthur is credited with making the decision to advance beyond the 38th parallel once we'd made the Incheon landing and had defeated the troops there. The North Korean troops collapsed just about the same way we had at that time, and they had to retreat back into North Korea. So MacArthur said, go to the 38th, past the 38th parallel up to the Yalu River, which is the border between Manchuria and the Korean Peninsula.
MacArthur was interested in going fast and pushing. He wanted to go right to the Yalu River and run the North Koreans right up across the river into China.
MacArthur got this idea to invade there, and everybody was against him, the chief of staffs, everything, and they fought him like everything not to do it, but he went ahead and done it.
The Marines told General MacArthur in Japan that the Chinese were here, and sometimes we think it's in force, and he said, well, no, he says, that's just a few laundrymen, and a couple of Marines could take care of them. Don't worry about it. But they had 120,000 people had come across the ice of the Yalu River, and obviously, and our intelligence did not see one of them as far as they were concerned. They weren't there. And obviously they snuck around, encircled us, and that's where the Chosin Reservoir battle started.
It wasn't until we hit the Chosin Reservoir, which is in a mountainous area in the northern part of Korea, along that borderline. It's a very difficult border, always has been. And it wasn't until we hit that spot that we ran into the Chinese armies. And I don't think MacArthur's staff realized that they were fully committed to being in the war. They hadn't been up until that time. There'd been no sign of them at all, and he thought he has an easy shot. So he said, everybody go on up. And it was more like a you'll be home by Christmas routine. Just go on up, occupy the place, and then we'll bring everybody home. And it didn't turn out that way. It did turn out that the Chinese were deeply involved in the thing.
We are fighting in Korea for our own national security and survival. We have committed ourselves to the cause of a just and peaceful world order through the United Nations. We stand by that commitment.
They sent the occupation troops to Pusan, which is in southern Korea, and we made an amphibious landing at Incheon, and then when we landed, it just changed the whole complexity of the war at that time. And we captured Seoul, and the Army moved up from the south, and it gave the Army more time to bring in more troops, etc.
First of all, the North Koreans had been defeated, and they were all wildly retreating to the north. And we were in there to occupy the land and occupy the people and to drive to the north. And so we were driving all the way up to the Yalu River, which is the borderline between China and North Korea.
I landed in Pusan, and then we boarded the ship and came around with a landing craft into Incheon. And we made our way up through Incheon until we secured that area, and then they removed us and took us around by ship into Wonsan.
Our next project was to go into North Korea from Wonsan and then start up this main supply route, MSR we call it, where it led up, directly up to the Yalu River.
And in October, we thought we were going home. We thought the war was over. Then the Chinese came into it, and we started moving on toward the Yalu River. We were going to the Yalu River and stop them.
MacArthur, one of the few things that he did good. He moved the Marines out, and they made the Incheon landing, and his intentions was to cut off the North Korean supply lines coming, supporting the troops that was in South Korea. So that was a good thing.
We made the landing at Incheon and pushed on up to the Chosin Reservoir. Of course, that's when Truman said, can't cross the border, and that's when the Chinese became involved.
And we got up there and sat there and waited till the Chinese came over and kicked our butts. They was all over. They were just like flies on buttermilk.
Well, we got as far up as Coterie, and that's when the Chinese started coming in on us.
We started hitting Chinese about Thanksgiving. Our Marine units started reporting that they were hitting Chinese at that time.
There was an Army unit taking over the east side of the reservoir, and the Marines were taking over the west side. And so the Army battalion was just getting into place at the time that the attack came.
The reason that our unit was in Korea is because they needed troops badly. The current Army troops were just falling apart. They couldn't sustain anything over there. They were being beat pretty badly.
The Army group that was over on the east side of the Chosin were practically annihilated.
They were almost completely annihilated. There wasn't a few of them. In fact, some of them came over to my platoon.
Our first regiment from the 24th Division was the 34th Regiment. They went in and they were totally annihilated.
And they essentially were massacred. There weren't many of them left. They had to walk out across the reservoir itself, which was frozen solid at the time of the Chosin campaign. And not many of them made it back. None of the commanding officers did. And the few people that did were those that didn't follow a standard route to get there.
We had 2 battalions of the 7th Infantry Division. We're on the east side of the reservoir, and we're hit hard by the Chinese and just damn near obliterated. They suffered horrendous casualties up there.
We went on the right side of the reservoir. That's where the 7th Army got clobbered. So as we pulled out, the 7th Army Group came in behind us and took over our position, but they didn't get established. And we didn't realize it, but the Chinese were about ready to pull a plug and come on.
Well, the Army was over on the other side, and they didn't do very well. When the Chinese attacked them, they beat them up pretty bad.
Of course, the Army come in on the east side of the Chosin Reservoir, and they didn't fare too well.
Because they had to run the gauntlet right down through the mountain pass there, and the Chinese were dug in on both sides, and they just tore the heck out of them.
It was a matter of trying to survive. It was a matter of pulling out as many troops as we could of the survivors. We had our lines were stretched way too far. I mean, they're all the way up through North Korea, so our lines were stretched, and of course the Chinese moved in. They got up in the higher ground in the hills, and so when we started withdraw, they're sitting up there just like shooting ducks in a water barrel.
And all of a sudden we heard that the Army divisions, the 3 Army divisions on the right, or on the left of us, had been overrun.
The Army, which was on the left flank, they were surrounded too, particularly the 31st and 32nd Regiments. 31st took terrible casualties, 31st Army Regiment of the 7th Army Division. They took terrible casualties. In fact, some of their survivors made it through our lines, and I'll never forget seeing those guys come in. We realized they were friendly. We let them into our perimeter and tried to take care of them. They were frozen, and this one sergeant is a strapping young man. Both his legs from the knees on down were black. And I figured, oh my God, this guy's going to be an amputee. And it was just heart-wrenching to see some of these men.
Chinese came in and they really threw everything they had at us. I can still remember sitting up on a hill and watching these Chinese overrun us. Then the company commander said, "This is a plan Z. It's every man for himself." He said, "Down at the bottom of the hill, there are tanks. Go for it." He says, "Every man for himself." And that was what they referred to as a plan Z retreat.
In Korea, they are attacking waves. So I knew that if I didn't do something, I'm going to let my friends down, and also I'm going to get killed. So I started firing.
And there wasn't any way to stop them. I mean, you couldn't load your gun and fire fast enough. They didn't care how many they got killed. They just a mass attack, and they pushed us, and daylight came. We had orders to withdraw, but there wasn't any left to withdraw. I went up there with a full platoon. I had 39 men. Came out of there with 13, 7 of them wounded.
When the radio calls came in, they said, "We're being overrun. We need more ammo, we need reinforcements." And the radio went dead for a bit, and then it came back on and said, we're being overrun, we can't hold.
There was no way out, so we fixed bayonets and got ready for basically a Custer type situation, you know, where we didn't have a chance.
There was portions of our outfit that was overrun.
The Chinese just overran them.
They just overwhelmed us with manpower, even with our air force.
We were wiped out. That's what I say. Make this, well, we always get our advantage kicked. But you know, when the odds are 30 to 1, 40 to 1, you're gonna get kicked. You can't run fast enough.
Oh yeah, they overrun us. They overrun us. At one time, we lost 13 out of 16 guns. We lost 45% of our people.
The survivors came across the frozen Chosin ice, walked across, and came to Hagaru, where the Marines were.
We were written off up there. We weren't going to make it. But our leadership and our people proved you don't ever write us off.
The Chinese during the 1920s
had made a reservoir up in these mountains, and it was named the Chosin, spelled Chosin Reservoir. That's the Japanese name for it. The Chinese name for the same reservoir is Changjin.
Actually, is officially called the Changjin Reservoir. However, on the Marine Corps maps, which were made up by the Japanese, they called it the Chosin, so we called it the Chosin.
It was about the 1st of November that the 7th Marines started up that road to the reservoir, and this took probably about 2 or 3 weeks, and they must have worked 50 miles to the north, and they got to Udamni, which was at the base of the reservoir, close to the base of the reservoir. But this was a one road right in the middle of these rather ferocious mountains. But you know, you always want the high ground. That will give you a number of advantages, a height where you can see down on everybody. It makes it difficult for the enemy to climb up the hill.
This is a 78-mile overgrown cow path. That's the only road up there. And there's no way of saying, well, let's take this road. There is no other road. So, and the United States is mechanized outfits. The Chinese are are basically on their feet. So they can go across country with everything they got. Now we have to basically depend on this road.
We were heading up a single main supply route toward the Chosin Reservoir. And this was unfortunate because this single road through the mountainous area was very vulnerable to attack.
We, the Marines, were sitting there at the Chosin Reservoir waiting to do something, go one way or the other, when the Chinese started pushing them, and they literally surrounded the Marine Corps.
We were fairly close to the Yalu River, and the Chinese entered the conflict. That was a whole new ballgame.
Once we got to the Chosin Reservoir, as I said, the units split, and the Chinese, who were not supposed to be there, it's proved to be something like 120,000 Chinese slipped in behind us and around us. MacArthur had said earlier that the Chinese would never enter the Korean conflict. When we start sending them reports that we were encountering Chinese, I understand that they were withheld from General MacArthur because no one wanted to be the bearer of bad news.
MacArthur wanted us home by Christmas, and he wanted to push the Chinese back across the Yalu River. And unfortunately, he would not listen to adverse intelligence. Everything is going perfectly.
The intelligence did not pick up the fact that all these thousands of Chinese were coming across the border. And so everybody was surprised by the numbers that came across the border.
It was either a blunder, he either had awfully bad intelligence, or he just didn't give a damn about the intelligence when he pushed the troops up to the Yalu River and saying, you know, all the Chinese won't come in. Well, you know, they came in with lots of divisions that were sitting just across the river. And that's when the Chosin Reservoir problem came about. That's when we really got kicked back to the 38th parallel.
They kept saying, no, the Chinese aren't going to come in. They're not coming in. Well, they came in. Thousands and thousands and thousands of them.
Marine second lieutenant said, where are you guys running from? He said, the Chinese are coming. He said, no, they're not. About that time, they came over the hill, banging on the drums and blowing the bugles, and millions of them, it seemed, like ants.
The Chinese came across in hordes and hordes and hordes. They wore big white suits, like they were like a doughboy. It reminded me of. They were so puffed up. They were so many of them that you could look down off the mountain and barely make them out in their white suits against the snow. But you could see little things moving. Just the whole valley was just crawling with them people.
I went on way up the reservoir, and we were overwhelmed. From what I gather, they tell us it was 164,000 Chinese, 8,000 to 10,000 Americans, mostly Marines.
We were greatly outnumbered, but the Marines were so much better troops than the Chinese. The Chinese were using a lot of very young troops who had never been in combat. They didn't really know what they were doing. They didn't even know in a lot of cases where they were.
Human life didn't mean anything to them. They just kept coming. And you know, with a machine gun, you just keep killing them. I mean, they would stack up, and it was, you know, you wonder why these people do those types of things. And they were vicious.
Machine gunners, they just mowed them down. Rifle companies.
They do just like your Japanese did in their Banzai attacks. They just come in a group, just run, try to overrun you. And we had our machine guns set up where they would crossfire each other, and it was just like out there killing people that didn't have a chance, and they didn't have a chance. I'm talking about literally thousands of men running right after each other, coming at you, screaming and blowing and horns and everything they can.
You know, it was very difficult for them to believe. It's almost unbelievable to see that many people killed that quickly.
The Chinese came and I was on a quad 50, and all you did was fire all four guns at the same time on the MLR. And they would come in waves. I mean, they were crazy. I mean, you could hear them screaming and hollering and carrying on, and they would just thousands of them.
And it wasn't at all like they taught us, because Orientals fight differently. They fought us. They came at us in mass.
They charge, and we'd mow them down like cordwood.
We found out that whenever we'd hear the bugle, that they would charge. As soon as it was ended, that was meaning for them to charge.
You know, we're just like the movies here. Rah! And the horns were blowing, and they overran the hill, and the Chinese were bumping into me.
We could hear those Chinese coming in with their bugles.
The flares would go up, and the whistles would blow, and the bugles would blow, and they would attack.
And they didn't blow them until the attack started. And it was, you know, they didn't have any radio, so that's what they used to coordinate their forces.
They would blow bugles when they started at you, and they would come in 400 or 500 people in a group, and you just had to shoot them all. And a lot of times they would come 500 in a group and attack us, and they would all stay there in the snow.
I know a lot of it was signals, but a lot of it was psychological too.
Some of the units, some of the men coming in, the Chinese did not have weapons. They were told to pick up the weapons of the dead ones in front of them, and we were furnishing them with a lot of those.
The Chinese were so many, they just mass attacked. And the way they fought is the first line had weapons. The second group had hand grenades. And others had whatever they could pick up on the way through for the ones that got killed in front of them. And they'd come in with knives, they'd come in with weapons, and they'd come in with hand grenades, and they would even rock, stones, anything they'd get their hands on.
They did not have enough arms and ammunition to supply everybody. So it was a massive overpowering of manpower with that type of mentality that I think gave them the edge the few times that they did whoop our butt.
They didn't care how many lives they would expend, and they just keep coming at you. And we would have tanks up on line, and then we would have half tracks with quad 50 machine guns in between each tank. And we would be firing point blank at these Chinese that were coming at us from maybe a distance less than a football field away. And it was just a carnage.
Just mass attack. That's the only thing that's the only tactics they had. They didn't have anything of fire and maneuver or flanking movements or whatever. Just throw them at them, and just till you make us run out of ammunition, or they smothered us, one or the other.
I'd never been anything like in my life. I couldn't believe humans could go through what we were going through. I mean, there just wasn't anything you could do about it. You just were outnumbered. They claimed that we were fighting 18 divisions. And I imagine now, they say they had over 500,000 Chinese over there, besides some North Koreans that came back with them.
Well, in Korea, every hill that you go north is higher than the one you just left. It's one damn hill after another.
Porkchop Hill was just off to my left flank, and I could see and hear the fighting going on there because they had a terrific battle there.
We was in the trenches at Porkchop Hill, and they get all the way up to the trenches, and sometimes we have to take them to defend and fight it off all kinds of ways. Sometimes you might have hand-to-hand combat.
Well, it seems like every time you turn around, somebody was being shot.
As we're going up the hill, we couldn't move. We were in a holding position, and that was it because of the amount of fire that was coming in on us.
I guarantee you, when you get shot at every day for quite a while, it messes up your head.
Now you can imagine when the man says fix bayonets, what goes through your mind? All right. And I had a guy come over the parapet and I hung him on a bayonet. Nobody was invincible. You knew that there was a possibility. You knew in your mind that there was a possibility that you were going to die. And how do you die? That's another thing. How do you die? And if you die, where do you go?
I've always believed in God, and I really believe that God took us through this. I don't see no other way out. I mean, you don't fight 18 divisions of 18 other divisions of Chinese without God's help some way.
It's hard to kill somebody unless you're being really threatened.
I had no idea about how you would feel if you killed somebody. Well, then I squeezed the trigger. I don't know why, but I just did. And it caught him right flush in the face. Instantly, he was dead. Shooting somebody after that was never a problem. Excuse me, I don't do this very well. Killing somebody is easy if you can forget it. I can't forget none of them.
But then when you saw the realization that it's survival of the fittest, it's either him or me, you don't have anything to think about. I mean, the choice is gone. It's kind of tough the first time. But I know of 4 people that I personally put down. That's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to overcome. But as I said, first time it's tough. But then when you see what goes on, that your buddies are being hit, your friends and acquaintances and your allies are being shot and slaughtered, and you say, hey, we got to do it to keep ourselves going.
And that's a different experience, too, that first time you think, what have I done? You know. But then your second thought is this is survival, basically.
Now, you're put in a position, you know, them or me, you know what your choices are.
When somebody's shooting at you, you got to get out of the way or shoot back. So what do? You say, well, would God want me to do this? I don't think that's going to be a question you're going to ask.
Well, yeah, it's pretty damn scary. I mean, you got a guy there facing you. He's got a weapon. You got a weapon. You don't know whether he's going to pull a trigger or what. And so you slam into him, and sometimes you shoot him. Sometimes you have to do other things to them. It's a case of survival. And we're trained to take care of ourselves and take care of our men, and that's the way it is.
A lot of times it got hand-to-hand for the guys up on the hills. I mean, it really got hand-to-hand. You found out that an entrenching tool was, you may not use it for digging, but it sure as hell made a good hatchet for hand-to-hand fighting. You know, things like that. It was down and dirty.
You get into a different state of mind. And it's a state of mind that most of any combat veterans can tell you about it, but they don't understand. It's just something that happened.
You got to be numb or you'll go crazy. You got to be numb. You got to almost detach yourself from everything because it's overpowering.
I never wanted to kill anybody, but it's when you get into something like that, it's either you or him, one of the two, and you've got to stand up.
It's either me or him, and if I can get him first, that's all the better. You know, you just figure, well, he's shooting at me, I got to protect myself, so you shoot back.
But you concentrate on one thing. If you're a platoon sergeant, take care of your men and try to get all of you out of line.
One of the elements in Korea that we haven't really faced in other wars is the cold weather. I mean, you're talking about 20 to 30 degrees below zero with wind chill indexes of 40 and 50 in the mountains of North Korea, and that's devastating. Just trying to survive that, let alone being shot at and shooting and this sort of thing. So that was a very bad time, and we lost a lot of people to frostbite and freezing.
When we got up there, the cold set in immediately, and by cold, I'm saying the warmest it got while I was up there was 20 below zero at noon. At night, it got down to 40 below zero, and at one point, it was 60 below zero.
I had my wife send me a thermometer from the States, and so I put that thermometer out side of our bunker, and the coldest that it got was 40 below zero.
The reservoir itself was a solid lake, frozen solid. It was the coldest winter in 105 years of recorded weather in Korea.
The only time we ever had anything like that was in the Battle of the Bulge in World War II. It got real cold over there and everything.
Temperatures were down to 30 below, and the winds were howling. And we all had on every bit of clothes we could wear. I even put a poncho on over the parka and everything, just to try to break the wind. But it was miserably cold. My hands and feet were frostbitten.
It started to get very, very, very cold. They gave us snow packs, which were rubber boots with a felt insole, wool socks.
We had leather boots, and then we had a rubber boot that we had an insole, and we had wool socks. One insole was in your boot, and when it got wet, if you were active a lot, no matter even at that temperature, in a rubber boot, your foot would sweat. But as soon as you stopped, it froze.
And that's how so many people got frostbite, particularly on their feet. Some of them much worse than others.
And you could feel the ice between your toes and in your feet, and that water in your boots froze.
So what you had to do is you had two pair of socks. The ones you were wearing all day would be all moist and everything. You'd have to put them under your arms to dry out at night, so you'd have some fresh ones to wear. And that,
the cold was still the biggest enemy of anybody there, including the Chinese. The Chinese were wearing gym shoes, tennis shoes only, and they were crazy for our boots.
And they had no clothing. Most of them had little canvas shoes, and I've seen pictures of ankles that big with blisters from the fluid leaking out and freezing. I've seen Chinese walking on a stump of a bone because their foot broke off. I mean, froze solid and broke off.
Their feet frozen. Their feet were wrapped in rags and coal black. It was miserable. I mean, it was horrible.
They did not have as good a clothing and cold weather equipment as we did, and they suffered tremendously from the cold.
Many, many of the infantry people lost their feet. The last reunion we had, one of my friends went down there to deliver something, and he said he never saw so many wheelchairs in his life because the guys that were coming were all, they had lost their feet.
It was so cold that, I don't know if you've ever seen a morphine syringe. Okay, it looks like a Blistex thing you put on your lips, and it has a needle on it. Well, it was frozen, so you couldn't use it. They put two of them in each cheek, like a chipmunk, and work on the guy, and they'd keep him warm enough so they could give him morphine and for a bad wound. And we wouldn't, there's a hell of a lot of us that wouldn't have made it out of there if it hadn't been for those guys. They're the greatest people in the world. You want to get a Marine mad, say something bad about the Navy corpsman.
The thousands of casualties that came out, at least 40% of them were due to the cold. They'd had some member of their body frozen to the point where they had to be evacuated. They could no longer function.
And it was so extremely cold, I was on 2-hour guard duty, that I didn't think I'd make it, because it was just, the type of cold would go through your body and cause pain. It was almost like a torture being out in it. I'd never experienced anything even close to that.
The cold was so extreme that we were losing as many men to the cold, as we were that were getting shot. You couldn't lay down, you couldn't sleep, you couldn't do anything. I was never so tired in my life.
But I remember when we were moving up to the front, it was so cold, I didn't care whether I lived or died. Now that's pretty cold.
But it's just unbelievable what was going on. I mean, you can't understand what it is to try and fight in 45-degree below zero weather. Nothing works.
Sometimes it was so cold that all the equipment would freeze. Nothing moved. Trucks, jeeps, tanks, nothing. It was so cold. Sometimes you'd wake up and there'd be 2 foot of snow on top of you. And your guns wouldn't work. They were froze up.
Most of the weapons we have didn't work. They'd freeze up. There was so tight tolerance that they'd just freeze up solid.
The cold saps your strength mentally and physically. And I think that was my biggest fear, was that I would fall asleep.
We slept very little. We were on the move almost all the time.
Oh, God, man. And trying to sleep at night, just laying there shivering and shaking. It's just unbelievable. Unbelievable.
And then at night, your salvation was your sleeping bag. If you didn't have a sleeping bag, there just wasn't any place to go at night.
You crawled in your sleeping bag with all your clothes on.
We always carried our sleeping bag. No matter where we went, no matter what we did, we always carried the sleeping bag.
Your sleeping bag, winter sleeping bag, was one of the lifesavers because it would thaw out your water, it would thaw out the food that you had that was in tin cans.
I vowed when I was there that if I got out of that place alive, I would never complain, no matter how hot it gets.
You'd be surprised what you can take when it gets down to it. It gets down to the nub. You're surprised what you can take.
We were going up a side hill one day, and as the squad leader, I was leading, going up at an angle like this, and the gooks across the way opened up machine gun fire, and as we're going up like this, the fire bullets were landing underneath my feet. They caught the guy behind me in the leg, and the fellow behind him that was our assistant gunner in the heart, right on the spot.
One night I killed a Chinese lieutenant, and standard procedure the next morning was to go through his clothing, look for any kind of intelligence information that might be of benefit to the intelligence section. And in his belongings I discovered a picture of a young woman and a child. And it was a very saddening thing to me to realize what I had done to that family.
Henry Schuler, when he died in my arms. And I told him, he asked me if I would tell his parents how he died. He lived in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. I said I would.
I had friends die and tie in my arms and stuff. And you know, it was tough. It was rough.
And then they told me, say, didn't you know that David got killed last night? Now, what you mean he got killed? He said a round came in and blowed his head off. And that thing hurt me so bad, you know. those things like that would make you. I got angry for one thing, and by me getting angry, it made me want to go out and kill and do more.
Out of the four of us, I was the only one that was still living, and I hadn't even been wounded. I'd had the hell scared out of me by the concussions. Those rounds start coming in. It's the most terrifying experience that I had ever had.
Scared is the big word. Anybody tells you they weren't scared, they either weren't there or they're lying. I was scared every time.
And my buddy Charles Carpenter took over for me from midnight on. Well, at 1 o'clock, a shell had come in and took the top of his head off.
My buddy we were going to chow and mortars were coming in, and you can hear them coming in. They whistle like, and the round hit him right square in the face, and his whole head was blown off.
Guys would call and ask for their mothers, and the nurses would comfort. And they'd say, yeah. They would talk to them as their mothers.
The average person, when they in combat and they get hit, the first thing they holler is mama. Although mama's 8,000, 9,000 miles away, you hear her screaming and hollering.
You try to help as much as you can, but it depends on what's going on. In other words, if you got a bunch of people and you're moving forward, you have to continue to push rather than stop. You got to keep moving, you got to keep pushing the enemy back. And then the medics came up behind us.
So many didn't get back to the aid stations to get help because they couldn't get them back. The roads was washed out, and we couldn't get supplies.
There were times when I didn't know if it was going to be there or not. See some of the boys right beside you didn't make it.
I went in a patrol one time and I saw 10 GIs with their hands tied behind their back, bullet behind their head, execution style.
Louis Molino got machine gun across the belly. He got killed. There was nobody left. All gone.
I got back on the hill, and we were shooting at them, and they were shooting at us, and the guy just stopped talking. And I looked, he was right next to me, and he'd been shot, he was dead. And you just don't know,
He gave us also something to read, as he gave us small Bibles. And the one thing he gave us was Psalm 91. And he said, read that, because we asked him, how do you die? Because we had so many who died. And he and his driver, Pete, were killed that day. And I'll never forget that. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty.
It stays with you as far as combat is concerned. There are a lot of things that you don't know that bother you. In fact, when I came back, it took me, I'd say, about 5 years to get normal again.
At the time that these things are happening, you're there trying to be a survivor and do what you have to do. And I can't recall other thoughts going through my mind other than the fact of protect yourself and your fellow man and try to get out of it the best you can. Do what you have to do. Kill or be killed, which is kind of callous, but it's a fact.
I remember that thing went off and there was a big flash, and they always say you never hear the one that gets you, and I didn't. It was just a big flash. But I landed on my feet. Now I'm naked from the waist down. I got no boots, got no trousers, got no shorts, no nothing. Flak jacket went to the waist. And I remember looking down at that bloody foot and bloody leg and saying, this is a hell of a way to fight a war. The thing that I really knew the most was my middle finger on my left hand was blown off, and it was just squirting blood.
You see guys, their intestines hanging out, blown apart, legs laying here, the rest of the torso somewhere else.
But when they do get hit and shot, you know almost immediately that they're not alive anymore, or if they do need help, the corpsman was there, or else you called for them or helped them and did the best you could to help your buddies, your comrades. But a lot of them were still in their sleeping bags, dead. They were bayoneted.
Our chaplain got shot. He was praying over a dying man, and they machine gunned the ambulance and caught him.
I remember a friend of mine being hit. We were in one firefight during one night, and he was hit in an artery in the crotch. And he crossed his leg, and he died of shock.
I was in rehab. I was going back to the hospital to see how he was, when I got another letter from my mother that said he had died of his wounds. So it hit me pretty hard.
The thing that I remember the most about it was, have you ever been popped in the butt with a wet towel in the shower? Well, just multiply that by about 1,000. That's the way I felt, because it tore both cheeks of my butt off. He'd caught a grenade between his legs. I picked him up, put him on my back, and started down the hill, and they started walking mortars down behind us. And finally one got us about 2/3, 3/4 of the way down the hill. Killed him, blew me on down the hill, and ultimately was evacuated and back to the States. That trauma cost me my right leg and several other muscular parts of my body, one finger.
One lieutenant was supposed to have had an eye shot out, and it was hanging on his cheek, and he just slapped a bandage over it and kept on going. He was wounded 3 times. The 3rd time he was shot through the face and through his tongue, so he could no longer give orders, so they evacuated him.
The trucks were carrying wounded only. Some of the trucks were loaded with dead, just stacked like cordwood. We were trying to bring out everybody and everything that we could.
He was young, just a kid. All of them were. It's a shame, but war is war.
I have a very good friend who's a hospital corpsman who, one of the first patrols that he went on, a young Marine that he'd become friends with while they were training to go to Korea. They were out and they got caught in an ambush, and this young Marine got shot, and he says, "Doc, I'm hit." Well, my friend, the corpsman, went up to take care of him and rolled him over, and it was this kid. And the kid looked at him and says, "Doc, I don't want to die." Last words he uttered.
After the fighting really got hot, it was more a question of surviving than anything else.
When you're in action, when you're doing something, you don't think that way. You don't think of anything except surviving, except helping, except doing, except working. You don't think of anything like anything like that.
At that point in time, when somebody's shooting at you, you're fighting for survival. And then what your intent was to make the world free. That's why I made the statement, I'd prefer to go over there than have them come over here.
So now if somebody's shooting at you, they're going to kill you. You go, oh, they're trying to kill me. You're going to react. If I come up and hit you or smack you, you know that, business, I'm finna fight you. So you have to go into the fighting move. You got 2 moves you go into. You go into the move of fleeing or fighting. So if you don't run, you have to fight.
You did everything that you had to do to survive. It was survival.
And I know I've felt at times, well, there's no way I'm going to make it. So what difference does it make?
You survive, and that's the bottom line. Every GI that says he's not there to survive is not telling the truth, because life is probably the most precious thing in the world.
It's kind of like you get into a different mood, you be a different person, and it was either you fight and survive, and that's what I did, and then it became a reality. Everything just become natural.
You can survive. You can endure tremendous amounts of pain and hardship and whatever if you want to survive. And that's what it is, a game of survival.
We certainly thought about God, and we certainly thought about our Maker. And some of the bravest people that we had out there were the chaplains who came to the front lines, who administered to us if we wished. Put a hand on our shoulder and said, you know, God's with you.
But while you're actually in combat, things are moving so fast that you don't have much time to sit around and think about, am I scared or not? But then when it's over and things calm down, you really become frightened. I mean, you start shaking and realizing, gee, that was a close call.
You have to establish good rapport with your men because your life depends on them.
You depend on each other because you know that man that's with you knows what he's doing. You train with people, you know those people.
The people all up and down the line depend on you, and this is what I told the younger guys when they came over, that we need you and you need us, so we take care of each other.
You're fighting because your buddy's fighting, and you're not going to desert him.
It was great because we all watched each other's back. I mean, everybody was there for everybody else. You know, you're with these people and you live with them 24/7. You know, you do everything with them. And you keep watching their backs as they're watching your back. You know, you need something, they'll help each other. And that's the way it was. And it was really a close, very close family knit group. And, you know, we're all at each other's mercy. And we're there as a team. We was brothers.
There wasn't no such thing as no black. There wasn't no such thing as no white. We ate out of the same spoons. We ate out of the same, drank the water out of the same canteen. We were friends.
You were their protector, they were your protector. And you worked together. If they died, then you didn't have any protector. So you went ahead and you tried to protect them as much as they tried to protect you.
When you lose a comrade, it's just, it's the worst of the worst.
It's your buddies. You know, they're here too, you know. Where they are, you are. Where they go, you go.
Even the Chosin Reservoir, when they're coming out of that frozen Chosin, they were carrying frozen, dead bodies out on trucks, stacked like cordwood, but they were bringing them out. They weren't going to leave them. We never left one for the enemy to capture.
And General Smith says we come out as one or not at all. And that's what we did.
It's something
I mean, it's a fraternity that I truly love.
The American flag is the most beautiful thing in the world. It'll fly and it'll stay above every flag of every country that there is. It represents, to me, the strongest country in the world, the greatest country in the world. A country that will be called on to help other countries with freedom. To us, the flag is waving and will wave forever.
I stand up when I see it. It means everything. Kate Smith singing God Bless America puts chills in me. I love it. I think the world of this country.
I fly a flag in my front yard 24/7. It's lighted.
No matter what some people do, the flag is still going to be the United States.
It's America. It's a combination of everything that is true about America and remains to be America.
Well, it's a representative of all the things I think in this country that you kind of take for granted because you're born here. And it isn't until you've gone elsewhere you find out that not everyone else has that same advantage.
And the American flag, when it flies, it symbolizes all those different things, all the freedom that everyone, don't care what nationality, who they are, if they're American, they have certain rights. And people have died for those rights. And that's what it means to me.
It means freedom. And it's hanging in my front yard right now. I've got the flag up.
That is priceless. That is really a symbol of freedom. People that have died, that is why the flag has red stripes. It is the blood. It is the blood.
That flag can go by me anytime. I can be driving the car, I'll pull over the side and stop.
Salute it every morning.
What it does to me, it gets me teary-eyed. And it's the Star-Spangled Banner, the flag going by, God bless America, people in uniform. It means a lot to me.
The American flag means my life.
Whenever I see it, I feel very proud to be an American.
That flag means everything in the world. When you can see that flag go up, I'll tell you, it just does something to you.
You better be careful with an American flag. You'll have me on top of you.
One of the biggest heartbreaks of my life was when they allowed those idiots to burn the flag a few years ago. And they said to me, they said, well, that's just an expression of freedom of speech. And I said, so is the two before I hit him between the eyes with. That is my freedom of speech.
That's why there are some people that want to burn the flag, because they realize that there's so much love going from that flag and they cannot compete with it.
I hate to see people at a sports arena that don't take their hat off when they play the national. I just want to get down and tear it off their heads, because that's a sign of respect.
Veterans feel very strongly about it. That's exactly the reason that the desecration of the flag to a veteran is considered impermissible. And that's why every veterans organization strongly supports the notion of a constitutional amendment to protect the flag from desecration, that we reject the notion that freedom of expression extends to the desecration of the flag.
I get very upset when I see things like the flag burnings and so forth.
I guess I'm a dyed-in-the-wool patriot, and I really want to preserve what we've got.
And it's cost us all the way down. All through history it's cost us, and it's still flying, and it's going to fly.
And it'll always wave. You'll never be able to take it down.
They would take that flag to their death. That's how important it is.
Politics aside, religion aside, everything else, that is the United States of America. That flag represents everybody that's gone before and everybody that'll go after. That flag is us.
No other nation in the world, I think, reveres its flag in quite the same way as we do. But the reason for it is not exactly clear to me, but I suspect it's because that most Americans associate freedom with the flag.
Oh God, freedom means freedom means the world. I don't think the average person realizes what freedom is. They really don't. You have to go through it. You have to live it. You have to be in a combat area to see just what's going on and know what's going on and be constantly afraid all day long.
What is freedom? What's it worth? You can't put a price tag on it. I've had people say to me, well, aren't you glad you aren't in Iraq or Afghanistan or what have you? And as flippant as it sounds, I'd go in a heartbeat.
We have the greatest country, and we are enjoy the greatest freedom of any country on the face of this earth.
And if you haven't been out of this United States, this is a beautiful place to be.
And I swear by this country. There is nothing like this country.
It is true. Freedom is not free, and if we don't jealously guard our freedom, we could lose it.
A lot of guys have died for that freedom. And if it's worth somebody dying for, it's worth having.
Without freedom, you ain't got nothing.
Comes high sometimes. Very high.
It ain't easy. And it's not free.
Very high, but be ready to pay for it because it's worth it.
Freedom is expensive, and there's a lot of people that lay down their life to do that.
Nothing comes easy. There's a hell of a price to pay for anything, as you're well aware of.
I have a lot of friends who aren't here today. That's a hell of a price to pay.
You know, our memorial has a saying on it: freedom is not free. It's going to cost, it will continue to cost if you want your freedom.
Our freedom is not free. It's been paid for by other people who have shed their blood for our country and given their lives.
You got to get that across, that patriotism and love of country and love of freedom is something that you can't buy, it's something instilled in you. And unless we instill in the coming generations that thought process, we're not going to survive as a nation, because there's a lot of bad people in this world, and they have a fervor that they really want to destroy us. They don't like what we're doing, they don't like how we do it, and they're jealous of us, trebly jealous of us, because all of the goodies that we have.
America is the greatest place in the world, and it made me feel good that I could go fight for my country and do the things that I did. And
I'll do anything for this country.
We love our freedom, and we'll fight for it.
Thank God that we live in America, and there's an awful lot of unsung heroes that have allowed us this privilege, and it is a privilege, and I'm glad to be part of it.
You know, I look at these guys out there today and that are fighting, and I walk up and I thank them. I thank them for doing what they do that allows me and my family to do what we do.
It's worth dying for.
It was a war that everyone wanted to forget. Forget we were there, forget why we had to be there, and why we were ever sent there.
It was an unpopular war. You know, it was Truman's war. They call this Bush's war. They called that Truman's war.
And it was forgotten because the American people perhaps had felt that they had enough of war. I think we felt with the defeat of Nazi Germany and Japan that we would have a very long period of peace. And unfortunately, 5 years later, we found ourselves again at war.
And we kept quiet about it. We didn't make the noise. We were told to just go home. That was it. You did your job. You were finished. Thank you. And that was all.
And I went home and I did what they told me to do. Go home, take your uniform off, and don't talk to anybody about over here because they don't want to hear it. You know, and they didn't. You know, the Korean War was the forgotten war.
Nobody was interested. Nobody asked you to give speeches. Nobody came over and said thank you or anything else. It was just total unconcern, I guess is the best way to put it. It's sort of hard to go defend your country and then feel that the great American public doesn't appreciate what you're doing.
There were never any parades or anything like that now. There was never any acknowledgement of our service in Korea.
We never got a hero's welcome or nothing when we got home. So you've been gone.
You were away for a while, and people would say, "Where have you been?" You know, it was like, "Where have you been?" You know, I went to Korea. Oh, that was it. Oh.
I had friends that when I came back, they said, "Where you been? I haven't seen you." I said, "Well, I've been in Korea and Japan and been in the Korean War." And they said, "Oh, yeah, that's right. You know, there was a war over there." You know, they acted even surprised.
We lost 54,000 men dead over in Korea.
Korea was not
a war that basically they acknowledged it was not a war that they were privy to share in. People didn't share in the war. That's why it became the Forgotten War.
You know, it's just one of these things that nobody knows or cares. On one of these reunions, some lady, Korean woman, came up, cleaning woman, and hugged me and thanked me. But so once in a while you do catch it, you know, but you know, it takes you by surprise. You say, what the hell are you talking about, you know? I mean, it's so unusual for it.
Nationwide, nobody wanted to talk about Korea. Why get involved in another war? Let the Koreans fight the war. You know, and that's, people didn't want to get in the war. Forget about it. That's the attitude. And it's always been called the Forgotten War because nobody remembers it. Nobody ever said thank you for being there. Nobody cares.
The other thing is the fact that you kept the stuff stuffed in you because you didn't want to talk about it.
But we never talked about it. It's a war. That's, again, probably a good reason why it's a forgotten war. Nobody talks about it.
Because most of us want to forget it. It's kind of impossible to do.
I was so surprised. I mean, they know quite a bit about World War II, and of course they know a lot about Vietnam, but Korea just seemed to be something people just didn't want to get involved in.
It is the forgotten war, I think, because that's the way you always hear warfare described. You hear World War II and Vietnam. Rarely do they talk about Korea.
Pick up any history book and see how many pages is in there. And it's in some fact of it, just a gloss over a paragraph that there was a war in 1950 in Korea.
I think a lot of our schools have forgotten about it. But I think it's part of our history that needs to be passed on.
I've talked to some younger people about military science, and you mentioned the word Korean War, and they don't even know where Korea is.
But I don't know why they called it Forgotten War. There's 54,000 boys died.
I've always felt that whenever a country is in distress, no matter where it is or who it is, America always comes to their aid. And that's exactly what we did for South Korea, of course, against the North Koreans. And I always thought I would have to be a part of that.
I think we did the right thing because when I see Korea today and the Korean people, I'm just very proud of their accomplishments, and I feel like I had a part of it.
We restored the sovereignty of South Korea. This was a nation that had been overrun by military means by the North Koreans, and it was a real test of the United Nations.
I think South Korea is now a strong democracy. The industry is great, and the people are happy, and I think we've done I think the people we saved from China, North Korea, was valuable for South Korea.
And I feel very responsible for helping them have a country. And I feel that it's a thing that I did in my life that I'm very proud of.
The Korean people, they suffered. The North and the South as well. Very, very bad. And we took our toll as well. How many of our GIs died there and still they're unaccounted for.
I've seen kids that die, they never had a chance to drink a glass of beer. Never had a chance to have a child, and they're dead. And you're not going to do anything for them, they're gone.
They don't want to see the face of war because it's not pretty. It is not a pretty thing to see.
I wouldn't wish war on anybody.
War is, like they said, war is hell. And I think sometimes we're justified in our fighting or attacking another country.
There's some things that I still have a hard time dealing with. I call them nightmares, reoccurring.
A lot of guys don't want to talk about it. But I'm almost convinced in some ways the ones that won't talk about it are the ones that are going to crack up.
I can't tell you a week that I don't have a nightmare, that I don't get out of bed and walk the house because I can't sleep for memories.
You know, when you see your comrades having, well, I mean, just obliterated, it's something you don't want to dwell on.
I'm sitting here with a lot of psychoanalysts telling me that you'll be okay. It's a long time ago, and you're still not okay.
It really got bad. I was waking up crying and bad dreams, and mainly because of what happened with Nickens. He died in my arms, and it's a hard thing to, you know, it's just hard, you know.
It made me realize that there's a fine line between living and dying. It also gave me a feeling that I did something that was good.
We felt like we were doing what should have been done, and trying to stop communism, trying to stop invasions like that. It's an experience I'll never forget.
It's a thing that I did in my life that I'm very proud of.
I did what had to be done. I'm no hero.
It was a bloody mess. And it was an experience that you can never forget. Never.
But as it happened so long ago, you sort of look back and you're glad you did it because you did something for your country, and you did something that was good.